Thank you for coming. I'm Carrie Rossi. I'm Director of Disability Services at Rhode Island College, and I want to welcome you to our event for Diversity Week 2016, teaching students with visual impairment and blindness tips, tricks, and techniques for the college classroom. So I'm mainly just doing a welcome, but the people that are really going to take the show from here today are one of our students here at RIC, Ms. Mary Abby Juzayan. She is an elementary education major, and she is president of the Advocacy and Beyond Club at Rhode Island College. We also have Carol Bellucci, and she is an adjunct professor of art here at Rhode Island College. And we have Professor Bria Governor, associate professor of biology, and Caroline Caswell, who is assistant professor of mathematics and computer science and educational studies here at RIC. So we have some goals for today. The first one is we want to increase your knowledge of the importance of making all course materials accessible to all learners. We want you to come away with some practical techniques for teaching students with visual impairment or blindness across different disciplines. So you'll be hearing about a visual arts class, a math class, and an honors biology class today. And the other piece is we want you to see the ways in which diverse learners and creative teachers enrich and enhance the college classroom. And I think as you hear each of our presenters, you're probably going to hear some themes after today, like after you hear the whole piece. Pretty much every class, there was teaching and learning that took place for Mary Abby, the student. There was teaching and learning that took place for her faculty members. And there were teaching and learning that took place for her peers in the classroom. And this took creativity, flexibility, and having an open mind. But I think you'll see by the end really what the benefits were to everybody that was in that classroom, faculty, student, and classmates. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Ms. Mary Abby Juzayan.
Hi everyone. Thank you for coming. So my name is Mary Abby. I am a junior here at RIC, and I'm studying elementary education, and my concentration is in English. But my final goal is to become a teacher for the blind and visually impaired. So in order to do that, I have to go and get my master's at the UMass Boston, because that's the only place in the East Coast that really does it. Otherwise, I have to go to like Delaware, which I don't really do. That's my goal for now. I started to want to be a TBI, this is what they call it, a TBI, probably in high school when I realized I really enjoyed the way that my TBI was teaching me and helping me and advocating for me, but like also teaching me how to advocate for myself, and I wanted to do that for other students. And then I also realized that there are so few in Rhode Island. We have like a very high number of visually impaired students here, but only a few TBIs. So I just wanted to kind of give back that way. And this is my service dog. She's a guide dog. Her name is Kylie. I've had her since I started here, so I've had her for 2 years now. She's 4. And just a fun tip is if you see her in harness, you're not really supposed to speak to her or make eye contact or generally interact with her. It's hard. And so I guess from a student perspective, what's really important to remember when you're trying to make things work in the classroom and make things accessible and usable is to remember how to advocate for yourself and to know what you need in order to succeed. So you have to know what your limitations are, but also like how you can push yourself. And like, I think you have to have an open mind in order to remember, like to think, oh, like this might not work, but if I try it like a different way, how can that change the outcome? How successful will it be? It's very interesting because when I was throughout my whole educational experience, I've had different experiences with kind of teachers and how they handle my visual impairment and how they prepare materials for me. So I've definitely had experiences where things weren't prepared in time, so I would be like, I don't know, like a week behind my class. It would be really awkward because I'd just be like, well, I don't have this assignment yet, but everyone else does. That can be hard, but also like, if I don't have, in general, if I don't have the right materials, it can be very challenging to, I don't know, because for me, I like to stay inconspicuous and kind of just go along with the rest of the class. I don't like to be like the center of attention. So like if I'm the only one that doesn't have something, then it's a little bit like obvious. And also you want to be successful, so you don't want to fall behind. But I've definitely had those experiences where materials were not given to me in the same context or with enough, like I don't know, with enough preparation. But then I've also had like amazing experiences where they've gone above and beyond, where professors and teachers have done so much to like make sure that I'm on top of everything, to make sure that I'm at the same level, making sure that assignments are ready in like the right format, or making sure that if it's going to be a difficult assignment, that we'll be able to like accommodate together and work together to figure out a different way to make that happen. So, for example, I've had to do a few projects where it would be a very visual project, so it would involve a lot of images, involve a lot of maybe graphs, or like generally a lot of drawing. And I said, well, my end goal is to be a teacher for the visually impaired. So like, what if I tried to make this into an accessible project for a student who would have a visual impairment, and then we could like accommodate that way. And it would turn out really well, and like it would be really interesting for both me and the teacher, because it would turn out to be a new kind of like experimentation to see what creativity level I'm at, I guess, because it's very much like you have to figure out new ways to make images accessible. Because images are one of the harder things. But another experience from a student's perspective is the way that you're treated if you have visual impairment. Oftentimes you experience people who make presumptions about what you can and cannot do before they even like kind of figure like your skill set or your skill level. So that can be a little hard, because they'll be like, oh, if you don't want to do this, you don't have to. But I'll be like, well, I never said I couldn't do that. So why can I not try? And often the more challenging part is that happens in front of the entire class, because you don't want them to think of you in a different way. You want them to think of you as an equal peer. So that's an interesting thing that happens sometimes. It happened more often in high school, I think, but it's still kind of occurs occasionally, which is okay, because again, with the advocating for yourself, like you have to be able to say like, no, I can do this, and like I don't need to have different expectations. You know, have different expectations from me just because of my visual impairment. I don't know if anyone has any questions, but.
Mary, one of the things you had mentioned to me as we were preparing for the presentation today was that for a lot of people in the room, this is going to be very new and very exciting. So
yeah, this is going to be So a lot of the things that you're going to I guess hear about today, and like can feel like different materials that we have and like see them and see how they're used. It'll be very different for you, and I guess it's something that's new and be a little strange, but for me that's kind of like my everyday life at this point. So it's kind of just I don't know, I'm just kind of got used to everything. So when people say like, oh, it's like amazing how you do this X, Y, and Z, and I'm just kind of like, that's okay, because I've been doing it since I was like 3. So yeah, that's definitely an interesting way to look at it.
And the other thing is that I wanted to mention is the work you did with the Advocacy and Beyond Club when you went to the international conference.
Right. So I guess like Harry mentioned, I'm now the president of the Advocacy and Beyond Club, which I wasn't. This is my first year as a president, so it's definitely been an interesting ride. But it's only October. For sure. Hopefully more interesting experiences. But in the past few years, Advocacy and Beyond has gone to a conference. It's Disability and Diversity Awareness Conference, and it promotes, like I said, disability and diversity. And it's all the way in Hawaii. And somehow we've managed to go every year for the past like 3 or 4 years. It's been pretty amazing. So we went. Everyone a few times already. And it's been like a really amazing experience, both in the conference and what you learned there, and also as like independence-wise, it's been really good, a good experience. Well, the first time I went with Kylie, that was interesting. It was a good 20-hour, no, it was a good 13-hour plane ride. And people were just, hey, there's a dog here? I was like, well, that's a good sign, I guess. You know, she's here after like 10 hours. She was just sleeping. I was just but and it's just been definitely a good experience overall, and I'm glad that we were able to do that because all of us I think gained something from it in terms of experience and it's a whole different state. It's so far away. So
Thank you, and I'm sure we're going to have questions at the end also. So as you hear the speakers, if there's anything, you know, there's going to be opportunity for question and discussion at the end. So the first person that we are going to introduce is Professor Carol Palucci from the Art Department, and she's going to talk about her experience teaching Art 102. 210, I'm sorry.
It was
210.
340, they keep changing the number. I never know what the number is. Hi, everybody. I'm Carol Palucci, and I'm in the Art Education Department at Brown College. I probably should tell you that I am retired from the Risky Museum as the head of education. I was there for 25 years. I started when I was 4. But it was a very interesting career, and so now I'm teaching here at Brown College, and I must say I love the students. Different from the RISD students, they're just so eager to absorb what I have to tell them. And they work hard. They've got jobs on the outside, and some have kids. So I really admire the Rhode Island College students. I went here, I got my master's here at Rhode Island College. It's very different then. That was a long time ago. So when I was informed that a visually impaired student would be in my class, initially I felt ill-equipped to handle this. My educational background consisted of 2 courses in grad school about working with children with disabilities and those with special needs. As an art educator, whose classes consist of visual stimuli and studio exploration, I was really concerned. So working with Mary Abbey, I did not meet her until the first day of class, by the way. So working with Mary Abbey, I asked myself these questions, 3 questions. How could I use this as a teachable moment for Mary Abbey, but also the 15 other students in my class? How could I make it meaningful for Mary Abbey and the other students? And what strategies would I use? With the very generous help of Carrie, I don't know what I would have done without you, Carrie. I became confident this could work. This could work to everyone's advantage. Me, Mary Abbey, and the other students in my class. I also reached out to other colleagues in the profession. Ginny Cartier from RISCA, the person from the Rhode Island Association for the Blind, and a couple of my colleagues at MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, who have a really good program for teaching in the galleries of the visually impaired students. And books. A lot of books were available online, so I became a student again, which I really loved, so I learned a lot. Carrie provided Mary Abbey with several types of materials to make the arts accessible to her, such as, and you'll see some of them over there, a raised drawing board, paint pens, which were a little hard to use, paper shaped with Braille, a tactile graphic kit, embossed pencil writing paper, so when you wrote on it, it was the dots were raised, so it was like Braille. In art class, I use a lot of low-tech materials. I feel that they're the best, and it worked really well for Mary Abbey, too. So, for example, textured collage materials with various surfaces, rough, smooth, corrugated, aluminum foil flat, aluminum foil crunched, and they worked well for Mary Abbey, I think they did, as well as the other students. I have to pause here, because not to mention Mary Abbey as an extraordinary student would not be fair. She is highly motivated, intelligent, and eager to learn, and also to be part of the group. She's very socially aware. She was and still is an inspiration to me. I don't want to embarrass you, Mary Abby, but I do. I love you, and Kylie. So how does a visually impaired person or blind person see within the confines of a visual art education class? The arts are an important component in the education of all students, but especially those who are visually impaired, for the same reason that they're important to students, because they connect the students' imaginations to questions about human existence and present issues and ideas that teach, persuade, and lead students on a journey of discovery. I had to think very carefully when planning lessons with Mary Abby in mind and the other students in my class. And in the end, I believe all of my students benefited intellectually and socially from having Mary Abby in class, especially with her dog Kylie, who really liked the students a lot. So working with Mary Abby provided me with the opportunity to explain how objects in the world of art may be perceived in a brand new perspective, that of no vision. These are unique educational needs. The challenge for me was to include Mary Abby within the context of the regular art education program. The curriculum for students who are visually impaired is much larger and more complex. I expanded my core curriculum to include different types of instructional strategies. Mary Abby learns about a world full of sounds, tastes, textures, of visual forms that are perceived in different ways. Communication skills were and are key. I used other senses to gather visual information about environmental information. So I began to use a very tactile aesthetic. My vocabulary became very visual. It was always visual, and at the beginning of each of my classes, I always show an exemplary work of art. And I asked students to describe it. And the key question when I was at the Risky Museum, the big thing was to ask, what do you see? And the kids say, I see this, I see that, I see the person. And everybody saw something different, but when a person can't visualize this, you can't ask that question. So I became aware of giving information, full of information, through the other senses. So when the other students presented their projects, I made sure that they were also using very visual language and explaining what they were showing. So in other words, they couldn't just say, this is a picture of my family, and it means this or that, okay, this is a collage of my identity, but they had to explain it in visual terms. And so they had to reach in to expand their vocabulary to include very visual terms, so that when I closed my eyes, I could visualize what they were saying. And I believe that they became better art education students by expanding this vocabulary to include lots and lots of visual information. We visited the Risky Museum, Mary Abby and I. The class also visited the Risky Museum in separate times. We also visited the Bannister Gallery at Rick, which I think is it's a wonderful place, and I wish more students took advantage of it. At RISD, at the museum, they made special accommodations for Mary Abby by allowing her to touch replicas of a Jackson Pollock painting, a smooth surface, a marble, and a rough wood surface. And so a hand unaided by sight, could figure out action, figure out sentiment, understand beauty. If you're holding a marble, a piece of marble in your hand, it's cold, and how do you feel when you hold this piece of marble? A piece of wood that would be in a wood sculpture. How do you feel that? So the hand, unaided by sight, can feel the action, can feel the sentiment, can feel the beauty. At RISD, they made special paintings. They created them a la Jackson Pollock, a la one of the other artists. And some of the wood sculptures. So we sat in the gallery, Mary Abby and Kylie and I and the museum educator, and we talked about the different textures in a Jackson Pollock painting, because you could trace line, you could trace curve, and you could discover thought and emotion, which the artist portrayed. At the Bannister Gallery, there was an exhibition of Bob Dilworth's paintings. Bob Dilworth, excuse me, Bob Dilworth teaches at URI, and he's a wonderful painter. He's received many, many awards. So when I realized he would be there, I said, okay. I went to James Munford, who's head of the gallery, and I asked if Mary Abby could be allowed to touch Bobby Dilworth's painting, and he said, yes. But what I did was I called Bob Dilworth myself, because I wanted to make sure, and James suggested I do that. So I called Bob Dilworth, and he said, by all means, because his paintings, everything in them. They have shiny objects, they have a lot of collage materials, and they're very visually informative, but you can also feel the texture of the paint, which was really nice. However, Mary Abby was sick that day, and she couldn't come, so that was so disappointing. However, the other students were allowed to touch, and that's a no-no. You don't touch works of art by students or by anyone else unless you're given permission. Because at the RISD Museum, we couldn't touch actual works of art, but we touched a sculpture, I think. That was good. And so the other students, I asked them to visualize through other senses what was in the paintings. And then I asked them to write a paper about it, because they rolled their eyes and thought that was not a very fair assignment. But they came up with some really good, a real good understanding of the meaning behind Bobby Dilworth's paintings, what he was doing and why he was doing it. They could see, so that gave them that dimension, but they could also feel what he used to describe particular people in his family. So that was a very good experience, and Mary Abby wasn't part of that. One of the most successful classes was a group activity, a project creating found object sculpture. So the students had to bring in stuff that they found that was discarded. And then I had 16 students, so I divided them into two groups, so 8 and 8, and each group had to create a sculpture, found object sculpture. I think big branches and all kinds of things. And Mary Abby participated fully in that exploration. She made her little origami. Mary Abby makes these fabulous little origami pieces that were great. And she was part of the discussion. She was part of the discussion about where to put what and whatever. And so that was so nice, because I found that there was a respect for each other, a respect between the students and Mary Abby. She was one of them. Sometimes I have to think, like, oh, wait a minute, she can't see. But she was part of the whole group, and a very informed partner with everybody. So I believe that art holds the key to learning and understanding about the self and about others in the community. And Mary Abby, the first week of class, we make a portfolio. And in that portfolio, their projects are inside that portfolio. So you can come up and look at it later. This is the portfolio. This is before I had any idea of Mary Abby's. I mean, we didn't have any raised material. We had nothing. So what they do with the students, and this is not a new project. I do this with every class at the beginning, and I give them words. I give them vocabulary words. Happy, sad. I use noun, pronoun. I use everything. So just throw out words, and they have to do something non-objective. They have to figure out through lines what those words represent, and then we go over and over and over. Mary Abby was great. I mean, I had markers. I lined up the markers, and you asked me to tell you what colors they were. Remember that? So it was like 10 markers: red, blue, yellow. And then she remembered. I can't remember, but she remembered all the different colors. And then she produced this with all the different words. Remember that, Mary Abby? Yeah. And what I had to do was I just had to tell her how large the paper was, so we had to put her hand around it so she could see how large it was. And then she went to work and did her expression of the various words that I used. It's pretty wonderful. Another project, you'll see all the raised things, but students had to write it off. And it was, I gave them the assignment, had to be the first letter of their first name or the first letter of their last name. And they had to create a character, and this character was going to be doing all these various things in this book. So we made the book, and Mary Abby actually made the book. Easy, wasn't it? So this is her book called Milk. And she told me the story, and I wrote it down. So these are these press-on that Carrie gave. And so Minerva the cat wants more milk. Minerva asks the turtle next door where she can find some. Ask Babe down the street. Ask Mouse down the street, he tells her. Mickey the Mouse has no milk to spare. Ask the milkman around the corner, he squeaks. Max the milkman has a big bottle of milk just for Minerva. Remember to share with your friends, he yelled after her, and as she went back home. So this is so cool. I just think it's so wonderful. And just actually doing, I want to get some more of these for my sighted students.
Yes,
Well, no, this is what I teach elementary students. They're not art students. Some of them are, but most of them are not. Some are nursing students, but mostly elementary ed. And they get really nervous about drawing. They get really nervous and think, oh, like, don't worry, I don't want it doesn't have to look like anything. So this is a nice way to get them to create something that's three-dimensional and it's not, they don't have to worry about those. And then we did collage, and you'll see more up there. Mary, do you remember this? The collage?
Yep.
Yeah. So we did a collage, and Mary Abby used all of the supplies that were provided for her by Carrie, and she also had some of her own supplies. So this is her collage, and here's her little origami piece up in the corner. And these papers were all yours, Mary Abby. Papers that had all the different textures on them. And her little heart, which is made of it's sandpaper, so you can feel the heart. But this is incredible. This is amazing what she could do. And I'll leave a lot of this work up there. We did printmaking, and this is the pencil. Yeah, so we had to create a hero chair, and you had to design it so it would depict your hero. And so this is what, and now put back there, but this is all raised, and you can see through that there are all these little dots. So everything is raised so you can actually feel what it is. And so this is Mary Abby's hero chair. You remember that, don't you? Amazing. So it was, painting. This was, we both giggled over this. We giggled over this, Mary Abby and I, because she had a paint pen. And the paint pen, now the paint was coming out with the same force. So this is her still life painting. And these are three-dimensional art, three-dimensional painting. And you just like squirt it out, which is really kind of wonderful. And so when we did the still life painting, this is what I do all the time with all of my students. I set up a still life, and I have them look at it for a long time. No, they can't do it for a long time, like 3 minutes. And then I have them close their eyes. And draw on the paper without lifting their hands. and they have to draw what they remember seeing in that still life. With Mary Abby, we touched the still life, and we had hydrangeas, and there were vases, and we had a teapot, and whatever. And then they had to translate that into a painting. So Mary Abby, because she looked at it through for other senses, she knew what they were. She could feel what they were. So this is her painting. We had trouble with the paint coming out, didn't we? Okay.
I'm gonna pass this around so you can
So
check
I
it out.
became like very visual in my, and I'll do this just very quickly with you. So I always, as I said, I always start out in my class with an exemplary work of art. Okay, so I want everyone here to close their eyes. Close your eyes. I'm going to describe this. So the painting is about 2 feet by 2 feet. It's a square painting created by an American painter in 1900. And he lived in Maine, in Crouch Neck, Maine. So this is a painting that he created. At the lower level, it's divided into like 3 sections. In the lower section, there are big, black, brown rocks with waves crashing over these rocks. Huge waves crashing over these rocks, almost ready to envelop the viewer. The second part of the painting shows a very rough sea, very, very rough, with white foam, and with angry. It was an angry sea, and it was getting ready to crash over the rocks. The top part of the painting is this gray area, this dark area with a boat all alone, all by itself in the middle of the ocean. We think that maybe the boat was trying to reach the land, reach the lee shore, but you could tell it's very, very stormy. This boat is rocking back and forth, back and forth. Okay, now I want you to visually describe the painting for me. Who wants to? Anybody? Come on. This is what it looks like. So Miriam, you could figure that out, right? So this is the painting, and it's called On a Lee Shore. And the students, I'm a big believer in literacy and art, and the students had to write about this painting. And they had to create a story, an imaginary story, imaginary character in the boat, or characters in the boat, and what they were experiencing, what they were feeling, what they were hearing, what they were figuring out. So it's a kind of painting that you can't hear. You can hear the waves crashing. You can sense the fright of the people or person in the boat on the outside. So this painting and many other paintings involve all of the senses. So I will leave this here. Thank you. I'm told I have to.
You have time for questions at the end
book.
too, and also all the materials and the example works are going to be there for everybody to kind of pass around. And,
All over there.
thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
So now I'd like to introduce Priya Governor from the biology department, and she's going to be talking about her experience teaching Bio 100H, which is an honors section of biology.
So I put these slides together in part just to help me orient myself, but hopefully they will give you a few things to also attach to, and of course feel free to ask any questions. I titled my presentation because I felt like this was a really important kind of takeaway experience for me, is that commonly when we teach our biology capstone course and seniors in the major have to explain a scientific paper to the audience of students and faculty to attend, we encourage them not to use the expression "as you can see," because not only does that limit many people's opportunity for understanding, but it's just not the most effective way of communicating. So this is a typical scientific figure that you might see in a publication, and it has many components. It has components labeled A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And a scientist might inappropriately say, as you can see, the experiment was successful. and then people are left kind of empty-handed saying, well, I don't see that. And then you might even go as far as to say, well, X is greater than Y, but I don't know where I'm looking. Or you might even say, X was significantly different, and yet, again, people don't know what they're looking at until you give them a greater orientation. So one of the things that I've taken away from the experience of having the opportunity to work with Mary Abby is really being able to also teach all of my students more effective ways of communicating science, both through teaching and other ways of academic discourse. So just as Carrie said, the course that Mary Abby was enrolled in was a Bio 100 honors course. And this is important to mention for two reasons. One, because in the honors section, the classroom size was more limited. So we had 9 students that semester. But also because Bio 100 is a general education science course, the students are, well, let me back up. As honor students, they tend to be focused and hardworking students, but Bio 100 is general education, so the students tend not to feel as confident in the sciences, so they share the experience of having different majors, different interests, and feeling a little apprehensive about biology. So it's kind of an interesting combination of strong aptitude, but maybe a little bit more apprehensive about the learning in biology. So it was a really nice setting to be able to have more flexibility and adaptability. It's also important to note that Bio 100 is required for admission into the Feinstein School for Education and Human Development, which is one of the reasons that Mary Abby needed to take it for her admission into the elementary education program. So in terms of my own preparation, there were a great number of resources that both Carrie and also Christine Wilson, TVI in Rhode Island, teacher for visual impairment, both met with me and gave me a variety of materials and kind of clued me into resources that were available. So one of them was this great book called Adapting Science for Students with Visual Impairments. And really it was mostly a book of tactile graphics, which was wonderful because it could supplement what we had in the textbook or what I could provide. But also it had a tremendous literature or cited references that I could draw from. So I used almost as much of their kind of reference material as I did use what they actually provided in this handbook. And that led me to finding other resources on the web and through other publications. And Christine and Carrie also collaborated and pooled their resources to provide me with a number of materials before I even started the semester. So in addition to some of the ones that were already mentioned, there was a large felt board that had all of the different major elements and molecule structures, so that if we were going to be referring to the process of hydrolysis as it relates to photosynthesis and cellular respiration, then we could actually move the molecules around on this felt board, and Mary Abby could tactily identify what those components were. And as I mentioned, there's also a tremendous amount of material on the web, so there's a lot of best practices. A lot of them, unfortunately, though, are geared toward K-12, and one of the things that I want to communicate is that this has been a wonderful experience, but there's still a lot of wonderful opportunity for collaboration and advancement in this area, because some things were oversimplified. And just as Mary mentioned early on, she didn't want things to be changed for her. She wanted to participate as the other students were. So we couldn't rely sometimes on some of the more simplistic models that were based more for the high school setting. But they were still a good starting point for thinking about things. And then the other most valuable part of this was discussion. Discussion with Carrie and Christine, but also with Mary Abby. Because as Mary Abby mentioned, she has a tremendous amount of experience and a depth of her own education that she was able to provide to me. So I was unaware of the way that she was able to use Microsoft Office. She taught me how she was able to use spreadsheets, and she taught me how she could use material that was in a tabular format in a way that I wouldn't have ever been able to anticipate. So those discussions were incredibly useful in terms of preparing. probably the biggest change that I made in terms of my teaching was just being much more descriptive in terms of the preparation of my lectures. And so much of, like Carol had mentioned too, that I stopped relying on just kind of displaying a graphic or displaying a number of words bulleted on the screen, but instead really had to engage with the students. And again, that's translated now into everything that I teach. And so I'm really grateful for that opportunity to challenge myself in that way. But also, we were able to make a much more dynamic experience in the sense that I hadn't been using a lot of physical materials when I was teaching in the lecture component. I was relying primarily on PowerPoint and just two-dimensional, printed handouts. But through Mary Abby, I started to become more sensitive to resources that would be useful to students to make certain connections and certain concepts. And so I often printed diagrams in a much larger format to fill an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And then I used wiki sticks, which were some of what was used in that notebook, and I'll just pass these around. To trace the diagrams, so in some ways it took relatively little effort to modify and make my own tactile graphics. So while it's great to have something like this handbook for the visually impaired, it is also something that was relatively easy to do on the fly. Of course, I think about it maybe the day before, a couple hours before lecture, but it wasn't something that was limiting in any way. It actually expanded our opportunities considerably. So wiki sticks are great. You can get them by the box full in the thousands for just, just tens of dollars, not very expensive at all. But one thing I also wanted to mention as part of this advocacy piece that we also relied heavily on Braille label makers. But you would think, perhaps, when you hear label maker, that it might be like a unit by Brother or a Dymo, right? But neither one of them makes a Braille label maker. You have to still rely on the punch type of label maker, which is very slow and tedious. And so I think we should all get together on a Kickstarter and make a good label maker that can be used much more efficiently, because they are so useful, obviously not just in the classroom, but in day-to-day life. And one of the reasons that I mention this is because not only was it important to label certain structures or components of one of the diagrams that I was using in teaching, but also existing tactile models don't come with labels. And so you might see some examples over there of some different cells and some different cells going through cell division, and they have raised surfaces, but they're not labeled. So they're not as useful really as resources unless they also include that. So a label maker is a very important tool. We used it heavily, and on the other hand, it could be much improved. We didn't find any limitation really in terms of our laboratory setting. We did do some preparation, or I went through our laboratory manual and referenced the books as well as the websites to kind of cross-link what we needed with what might be available on the market and what we might be able to build or construct specifically for those labs. But some of them required no modification at all. So we have 3 diversity labs: the animal diversity, plant diversity, bacterial, protein, and fungal diversity. And not that we're here for a biology lecture today, but there is a pretty significant component of our introductory biology course, and Mary Abby and I were able to travel around the lab together, and she was able to feel almost everything. And then it exposed me again to just the awareness that that's an important way for students to learn in general. And so being able to feel the underside of a fern, being able to feel a leech crawling along your hand. A lot of people don't like that, but they're important experiences, and they really do drive home some of the important kind of takeaway messages in a way that is not achieved through just visual or two-dimensional guides. We also run certain experiments in this introductory lab, one of them involving pulse rate. Of course, Mary Abby had no trouble at all participating in that type of experiment and tabulating the data, as I mentioned. Because she was able to expose me to how she used Excel, she was able to really kind of lead the charge in her group of being able to analyze the data. There are other things on the market that are really used for day-to-day use that are worth knowing about. There's a talking scale and a talking thermometer. Over here there are also rulers that have Braille on them, and the different increments are raised. We also modified our graduated cylinder, which I put over here as well. And this is something that I learned on one of those websites, but essentially using the wiki sticks to mark off increments on a rod, and that rod being stuck into a cork. When a liquid is added to the graduated cylinder, the cork will float, lifting the rod, and then you can measure the number of wiki stick increments that are exposed at the top of the graduated cylinder. So Mary Abby was able to collect all of her own data. She didn't need to rely on her partners at all. And so it was a really great experience for her and her group mates. So we did modify using these other materials, the metric system lab, and also a lab that we have in diffusion and osmosis. But again, she was able to perform all of the experiments on her own, analyze the data on her own, and it really took relatively little to kind of change things to accommodate her. So these are just some other representations. I wanted to do a physical demonstration for you today. It would have been more effective. But in our diffusion and osmosis lab, the way that it works is that we use dialysis bags, which are able to take on water across the membrane. And so we put these dialysis bags into different concentrations of sugar solutions, and they, through the process of osmosis, collect more water depending on the concentration of the sugar. And so they become either really plump and turgid little candies, or they become really wrinkled like limp little raisins, right? And so it has a very nice tactile sense to it, and it makes an important learning outcome. The other aspect of the lab that we modified, but not by changing any of our objectives, not by changing any of the written material or the assignments, was the microscope lab. So Mary Abby and I walked through the parts of a microscope together. Even though she wasn't going to use it as a tool, it was helpful for her to understand the connection between magnification and the way that a microscope operates to actually lift the stage of the microscope underneath the optics, so that as it's getting closer, the magnification is increasing, or to turn a knob and actually resolve the focus. And so I developed some tactile models that show the scale of size. And so rather than looking at a single cell magnified at 10x or 40x or 100x, I just took other tactile materials and scaled them appropriately. And so she was able to make the connection, but I'm quite sure that all my other students benefited from that. And now that's something we're incorporating in Bio 100, because it's very difficult for students to kind of comprehend the connection between what they see with the naked eye and what they see under the microscope as it is. So using those materials was helpful for everybody. The other aspect of the magnification that was valuable was being able to talk about some of the things in terms of resolution and focus, and the way that that is able to be translated in a tactile way also, in terms of resolving 2 points that are close together, or being able to balance them against the background. And so those are things that Mary Abby was able to identify with too through some of these other kinds of approaches. So just as was mentioned before, we really felt that all of the students benefited from these kinds of changes. Not only did they themselves become more aware and more in tune with their own learning, but also, of course, through working with Mary Abby about their own ignorance and the ways in which that they were either taking things for granted in their own experiences, or maybe undermining the people that they work with. And so that was, an invaluable experience that really benefited all of the students in that group. And many of them were aspiring to be elementary education teachers. And so we all feel like that was really valuable. I also think that the students developed better communication skills. I noticed that they went through the same transition of, as you can see, and then they were learning to be able to communicate more effectively, which is, there is more of this over here, or there's, this is oriented above or below this, or this is, larger than or greater than the, the other object. And so it really helped to improve their communication, and also, of course, their comprehension of the material. So that was something that we all benefited from. And so in terms of my own learning as an instructor, I really had to kind of orient, the listener more effectively to what I was conveying. Became much more connected to the experience of learning and listening through my own presentations. Using examples that engage other senses. I think this is really important to mention too, as we are in the presenting in Diversity Week, and really thinking about the types of biases that we might be using in our presentations that reference our own experiences, but not necessarily the experiences of others. And more so than just the kind of the learning outcome or the concept, but really trying to effectively choose the examples that are going to make that connection for the student. And again, preparing materials for active listening, things that I haven't really given as much consideration to before. And then I just have to echo again that Mary Abby is an exceptional student. And because she is such a strong self-advocate, because she was comfortable talking to students, talking to me, I learned so much through her. And so one of the things that I've learned again and again, not just through working with Mary Abby, is to not just try to relate and say, oh, I think I know what that might be like because of something I've experienced in my own experience, but instead to actually ask, what is this like for you? And let that person tell you from their experience, because each person is such an individual. And one of the fruitful discussions Mary Abby and I have continued to have over the years is that not all visually impaired and not all blind people have the same experience. Some are more timid, some are more confident, just like any other breadth of diversity in a group of people. And so we have to take those things into account, and again, not just to rely on our own personal experiences. And of course, I have to mention too, of course, being humble, because for all the preparation that you can do, things may not necessarily go as planned. And I think anyone who's been in the role of having to teach or educate, that can happen. But there is something that really is a takeaway message for me in terms of humility and recognizing just how much more I could grow and just how much more I could learn through this experience. So the last thing that I kind of want to do is just to point out again the opportunity for collaboration. I think that one of the things that could be really exciting moving forward, particularly where we have such a strong culture of education at Rhode Island College, is thinking about some of these materials. We now have a 3D printer on campus, and there are not great materials out there in terms of models that are comprehensive. They're overly simplistic. They're better tactile materials than just the kind of same polyurethane plastics that are used over and over again that just make smooth or bumpy surfaces. There are squishy ones and there are crunchy ones, and things that could be much more effective learning tools. And then, as I mentioned, the label maker. And I think that the last thing that I just want to mention in terms of the collaboration is really pairing together students of different disciplines and different experiences to be able to cross-fertilize those ideas and encouraging them to draw student-centered outcomes and student-centered projects of their own initiative, because that was where we noticed so much of the progress coming from the experience of and the opportunity of working in the area.
Like all our materials referenced, there's ones in our materials gallery over there that you can touch and play with. Okay, so we have also next, we're going to do a little bit of technology switch with the projector.
We just need to shut that one
Yeah,
off.
shut that one.
Oh, maybe not. After it did work.
It was on before.
Yeah, I know, it goes into sleep mode, is my guess, but I've never left it alone for that long. It's okay, we'll either figure it out or we won't.
No, see, I do see some kind of light, but it's not happening. I don't know. This is the thing, I know how to turn it on and how to turn it off, that's pretty much it. It's just not registering. I shut the screen, so wait, there's something.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, here it comes.
This may work.
That's your desktop.
It was just sleeping,
No problem.
It's okay. So I don't know how good you're going to make me see this.
I didn't introduce you formally. So this again is Caroline Caswell, professor of math and computer science and educational studies, and she will be talking about her experience teaching math 143.
So if you are not familiar with Math 143, it is designed for elementary education majors that take 2 math classes in order to graduate, and I suppose they can take more, particularly if they pick math as a concentration. But this is the first course in the sequence of 2. Basically, it deals with number systems, all the way through whole numbers, integers, fractions, so on. And I had 31 in the class, and it was not a small group. We were in a STEM classroom, which was really nice before Gage shut down. And basically, I, unlike the other 2, did not embrace the idea. I was very nervous about, I don't want to be in front of that, very nervous about the experience because I really didn't feel equipped to do anything other than teach mathematics. I've never taken a special ed course. I've never taken an ESL course. Back when I became certified 28 years ago, you didn't have to take those kinds of courses to be certified. However, you learn things along the way. I've worked in schools that have had a lot of special ed and ESL students, so you learn to adapt, you learn to try things. But in the end, I was nervous. I was really nervous. And I thought, well, maybe she'll just not take the class. Maybe something will happen. And no, it didn't. She didn't arrive the first day of class. And it's so funny because when she arrived, Kylie kind of was alongside her and came in, and all of a sudden I did like one of these gasps, and I went, oh, I think this is going to be okay. Like for some reason, seeing Kylie said, okay, this girl's going to be serious. She's going to be a real student, and she really cares about her education. I don't know why I thought that. But, so I was, trying to be the diligent teacher. I had a little front row center seat for her, ready to go, to have her, be comfortable. So when she came in, she knew right where to sit. And not the first day, we changed classrooms. So then she had to reacclimate to a new setting. And I know that everyone else thinks, you go from room 214 to some other room. It's really not like that. She has to learn a path because, as I didn't know, and these are all things that have just been so amazing for me to just figure out because I've been very lucky not to have any issue that I don't have a sound issue, I don't have a sight issue. So I've been very spoiled in thinking, well, everybody should just adapt and figure it out and it'll be fine. But she has to learn her path because she has to lead Kylie where to go. I always thought it was the dog leading the non-sighted person. Not so. So there's so many things that I've learned along the way, and I do agree so much with what both of you have said, but asking is how I found out so much of the information. It's just being interested, I'm trying to get that back to you, just being interested in her life and how it works and what it's like to learn a different way. And I think it was just I had to be humble because I knew nothing, absolutely nothing, and I really learned it all from Mary Abby. Kylie, I have to give Kylie credit to, and also Christine Wilson was really helpful in just helping me think outside the box of how was I going to use manipulatives we already use for math class because it is a tactile class, so that part was good. The downside was a lot of our tactile pieces, like these are colored discs. One side is yellow, one side is red. There's no difference between them. There's no shape difference. There's no size difference. So when I say, well, use the red side, the yellow side, there's no meaning behind that for Mary Abby. So I had to really start to think about, well, what are we going to do? Well, at first I was like, geez, I have no idea. I don't know what to do. And in the end, there was a board called the Tactile Drawing Board, which I really felt really assisted us in so many ways in how to make this work. And of course, I'm not going to find the sheet I want. Where did I leave it? Oh, over here. So instead of using color, which we clearly could not do, we often use the colored discs for things like adding and subtracting integers. So in a simple illustration, if the red discs are positive numbers and the yellow discs are negative numbers, then what students usually do is they team up. The whole objective is to team up the red and the yellow to make 0. So a positive number and a negative number will make 0. So this will make 0, that's gone. This will make 0, that's gone, and you'll be left with 2 red. That's the basic idea. And of course, since we didn't have that option, what we ended up doing in a similar scenario was to use the tactile drawing board. And I'm not sure you're going to be able to get a feel for the answer. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this very well. But what she was able to do was to use, it's not going to be very visible from here, sorry. They're basically, it's a flat, clear sheet that you lock onto a board, and then use a pen, and it bubbles up almost like, I call it Etch-a-Sketch, you know, back from when some of us were kids, meets puff paint. It's like when you write, it kind of raises up. So she can kind of feel that there are these circles, and she matches them up. She creates the idea where there's not color, but there's shape and there's size and there's matching. So everything we did was like that, where we tried to find what we were already doing and just finding a way to make it adaptable for her. Because the first thing she said when she walked in was, I want to be a teacher of the blind. I need to become an elementary teacher to do that. And I want to be treated like everybody else. She was very clear about that. We met regularly after class, and she helped me understand what I could do to make it easier for her to be part of the class. I didn't always succeed. I'm not going to say it was always, you know, some of the things she mentioned about making sure she had everything ahead of time, that was like 90% true. But there were times where I forgot, I did an additional handout that I really wanted to go over. I didn't send it to her early enough that she could do the jaw. You know, she had just a sound that will screen read her visual papers, and she can listen to it. And I didn't send it to her soon enough. Things like that. There are little glitches in the system. But the great thing about having Mariani particularly, which I don't know that all students would be as flexible and adaptable as she was, but she used humor a lot to just say, hey, you know what? So it didn't work out this time, we'll do it right next time. But you know, she had a great sense of humor in making me feel more at ease in being incompetent to serve her well in the beginning. I think by the end of the semester, we got much more in tune and comfortable, but I think I would have done better now than I did then, let's put it that way. The other issue was, this is not look all that well, because color doesn't, you know, this shows a lot of color, it doesn't show texture as well on the document camera. But one of the projects they had to do was an interactive notebook, and basically what your objective is to have all kinds of graphic organizers, foldables, and things that are tactile, things that are visual, lots of color, lots of shape, to help students learn the mathematics and then remember it visually. Well, of course, those options weren't really possible, but that was where Mariani had mentioned about some of the things that we could do, where we were doing a foldable on problem solving. Color was going to be of no value. And she said, well, you know, I can't really use color. There's not really any point in that, but I'm going to be a teacher of the blind. Could I do one that would be useful for them? So what we did was we adapted our foldables to be such that they would have Braille for her and English, you know, written language, plain text for me, so that I understood what she was doing, and then she put the problems in. So we were still able to do a lot of the work that the other classmates were doing. It just looks a little different. Same goals, same objective. Even things like when you want to do an array model, we often use you know, tiles, or we'll use square tiles, things like that. We use three-dimensional objects that had texture and depth, so that you could still count them really easily. And it was just finding ways that made it accessible to her, I think, was what the real key was. But in the end, I think other students also benefited from learning different ways of approaching. What if you had someone who, you know, I've had, let's see, students who had some sight issues before. Well, I've had to, you know, increase size, or, you know, do some slight modifications or accommodations. But so you can use a lot of these different things for any kinds of issues that a student might have. So anyway, let's see, what else did we use? We used the wiki sticks. Those would be very popular. I really liked those a lot. This one does have color. It wouldn't matter to her. Let's see, I'll send it this way, but you can't really see it. Okay, well, this is the general idea. It's Venn diagrams. It's kind of one of those things that you do because you want to deal with set theory. You want to make sure that students understand how to sort of arrange, do intersections, unions with numbers. And one of the things that I didn't even actually realize until the very end of the semester, but when she did this, she could feel where the intersection was, she could feel where the unions were. One of the things I did not realize was that our numbering system and our Braille numbers was 0 to 9. I guess there are actually numbers that go to 11 to 100 to 1,000. And so Mary Abby actually had to adapt her learning style for me to accommodate my lack of knowing how numbers work, that she actually had to put two numbers together that were actually in the wrong place value. So she would put a 2 and an 8 together knowing they're 28. I didn't know that she was having to make that adaptation for me. So there, we kind of both learned from each other along the way. Maybe more myself than her at times. So I definitely think one of the strongest things for me in this experience was making sure that I understood that there's help out there. There are people that are gifted in this area and have expertise that I did not have, and reaching out to them. There's nothing bad or wrong or about that, but to do it because they will help and they give you great ideas, and they're very understanding of maybe our inadequacies in those areas. I also think that looking to the student, some of the things that I thought about, and I think were mentioned by others, is it's very easy to say, well, okay, she probably can't do that, so we'll do this. No, let's ask her what she can do, and then if we need to adapt, we'll adapt it. And being flexible to do that, because I know that there are many colleagues who feel that this is the standard and this is the way I assess it and this is the way I need to assess it, but in fact, you can still make sure that the student understands it through a different means. And sometimes she did it orally with me in my office. Sometimes she would do it on the computer where she could do the wonderful spreadsheets and templates that she had some skills in. Sometimes she would transfer it to Braille. There were many different avenues in which she gave her assessment results, and I just adapted to that because I think the important thing was to make sure that she understood the material, which is what I was trying to get to anyway. Let me think what else I wanted to mention. I do like the idea of having an easier way to translate Braille, because we did need a third party to always do that for us. So we didn't use that as much as we probably could have. I think during assessments, she often would find another way to, whether she typed answers or whether she would send them to me via email, or there were many ways that she could adapt. And it was just things that she thought would work for her. In the end, I feel as though asking for help, asking the student what their needs are, and how you can adapt the things that you are already doing to better meet their needs. So trusting them to know those things that they can and can't do. Not expecting that they can't do what everyone else can do, and not expecting too much where they have to do it exactly like everyone else does. I think those are the things that were real takeaways for me personally. So in the end, it was a great experience. I wouldn't have traded it, even with 31 students, I wouldn't have traded it for the world. So I guess that's it.
You mentioned your paper.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
so I asked Mary Abby for permission to use some of her work, and I wrote a little, 5-page experiential kind of my learning. And it has been picked up by a couple of different magazines. Phi Delta Kappa, which is a K-12 magazine, it is coming out next month, and they've done some adaptations of their own. They wanted to change her actual work to something a little more digital, so it looked a little harder and, for their purposes. But they're really excited about it, and it's basically how my blind student taught me to see. And I do feel that was really, apropos for me, because I learned so much from her. I don't know if she learned as much from me, but anyway, and I am also looking at something a little bit more research-based in a teacher's journal, and we're still working on that. That's, forever. It's almost on a year now. So anyway, thanks very much for coming.
So we have the materials gallery there if you want to see any of the things, touch any of the things. And if you have any questions, I think it'd be good just to come and have a conversation. So it'd be more, not so formal. Just come and you can ask any one of the faculty or Mary Abby or myself or anybody. Or Kylie. Or Kylie. We're still figuring out what Kylie's going to wear for graduation. We know she's going to wear something special. So I would encourage you to just go play with some of the stuff over there and see what we have, and get some seconds on lunch if you'd like, because we've got plenty to go around.